Hello, this is Destridgnir, and these are the writings of Benjamin Franklin as collected and edited by Carl Japixi, uh, entitled Fart Proudly. Um, there are some opinions contained therein that aren't mine, and while I do agree with Sir Benjamin Franklin, vast majority of the time, sometimes we do have some disagreements, so just contain that in mind. And to start this off, I will read one of his many quotations. He that is conscious of a stink in his breeches is jealous of every wrinkle in another's nose. Benjamin Franklin, Poor Richard's Almanac, 1751. Two writings by Benjamin Franklin. The speech of Miss Polly Baker, 1747, a hoax that was widely reprinted as actual fact. The speech of Miss Polly Baker before a court of judicature at Connecticut near Boston, New England, where she was prosecuted the fifth time for having a bastard child, which influenced the court to dispense with her punishment and induced one of her judges to marry her the next day. May it please the honorable bench to indulge me in a few words. I am a poor, unhappy woman, who have no money to fee lawyers to plead for me, being hard put to it to get a tolerable living. I shall not trouble your honours with long speeches, for I have not the presumption to expect that you may, by any means, be prevailed on to deviate in your sentence from the law in my favour. All I humbly hope is, that your honours would charitably move the governor's goodness on my behalf, that my fine may be remitted. This is the fifth time, gentlemen, that I have been dragged before your court on the same account. Twice I have paid heavy fines, and twice have been brought to public punishment for want of money to pay those fines. This may have been agreeable to the laws, and I don't dispute it. But since laws are sometimes unreasonable in themselves, and therefore repealed, and others bear too hard on the subject in particular circumstances, and therefore there is left a power somewhat to dispense with the execution of them, I take the liberty to say that I think this law, by which I am punished, is both unreasonable in itself, and particularly severe with regard to me, who have always lived an inoffensive life in the neighbourhood where I was born, and defy my enemies, if I have any, to say that I have ever wronged man, woman, or child. Abstracted from the law, I cannot conceive, may it please your honours, what the name of my offence is. I have brought 5 fine children into the world, at the risk of my life. I have maintained them well by my own industry, without burthening the township, and would have done it better if it had not been for the heavy charges and fines I have paid. Can it be a crime, in the nature of things I mean, to add to the number of king's subjects in a new country that really wants people? I own it. I should think a praiseworthy rather than a punishable action. I have debauched no other woman's husband, nor enticed any youth. These things never was charged with, nor has any one of the least cause of complaints against me, unless, perhaps, the minister or justice, because I have had children without being married, by which they have missed a wedding fee. But can this ever be a fault of mine? I appeal to your honours. You are pleased to allow I don't want sense, but I must be stupefied to the last degree not to prefer the honourable state of wedlock to the condition I have lived in. I always was, and still am willing to enter into it, and doubt not my behaving well in it, having all the industry, frugality, fertility, and skill and economy appertaining to a good wife's character. I defy any person to say I ever refused an offer of that sort. On the contrary, I readily consented to the only proposal of marriage that ever was made me, which was when I was a virgin. But too easily confiding in that person's sincerity that made it, I unhappily lost my own honour by trusting to his, for he got me with child and then forsook me, that very person you all know. He is now a magistrate of this country, and I had hopes he would have appeared this day on the bench, and have endeavoured to moderate the court in my favour. Then I should have scorned to have mentioned it, but I must now complain of it as unjust and unequal, that my betrayer and undoer, the first cause of all my faults and miscarriages, if they must be deemed such, should be advanced to honour and power in the government, and that punishes my misfortunes with stripes and infamy. I should be told, 'tis like, that there were no act of assembly in the case, the precepts of religion are violated by my transgressions. If mine, then, is a religious offence, leave it to religious punishments. You have already excluded me from the comforts of your church communion. Is not that sufficient? You believe I have offended heaven and must suffer eternal fire. Will that not be sufficient? What need is there of your additional fines and whipping? I own I do not think as you do, for if I thought what you call a sin was really such, I could not presumptuously commit it. But how can it believe that heaven is angry at my having children, when to the little done by me towards it, God has been pleased to add his divine skill and admirable workmanship in the formation of their bodies, and crowned it by furnishing them with rational and immortal souls? Forgive me, gentlemen, if I talk a little extravagantly on these matters. I am no divine, but if you, gentlemen, must be making laws, do not turn natural and useful actions into crimes by your prohibitions, but take into your wise consideration the great and growing number of bachelors in the country, many of whom, from the mean fear of the expenses of a family, have never sincerely and honourably courted a woman in their lives, and by their manner of living leave unproduced, which is little better than murder, hundreds of their posterity to the thousandth generation. Is not this a greater offence against the public good than mine? Compel them by law either to marriage or to pay double the fine of fornication every year. What must poor young women do, whom custom have forbid to solicit the men, and who cannot force themselves upon husband when the law takes no care to provide them any, and yet severely punish them if they do their duty without them, the duty of the first and great command of nature, and of nature's God, increase and multiply? A duty from the steady performance of which nothing has been able to deter me. But for its sake I have hazarded the loss of public esteem, and have frequently entered public disgrace and punishment, and therefore ought, in my humble opinion, instead of a whipping, to have a statue erected to my memory. Alice Addertongue, 1732. I am a young girl of about 35, and live at present with my mother. I have no care upon my head of getting a living, and therefore find it my duty as well as inclination to exercise my talent at censure for the good of my country folks. There was, I am told, a certain generous emperor, who if a day had passed over his head in which he had conferred no benefit on any man, used to say to his friends in Latin, Diem perididi, that it seems I have lost a day. I believe I should make use of the same expression if it were possible for a day to pass in which I had not, or missed, an opportunity to scandalize somebody. But thanks be praised, no such misfortune has befell me these dozen years. Yet whatever good I may do, I cannot pretend that I first entered into the practice of this virtue from a principle of public spirit. For I remember that when a child I had a violent inclination to ever be talking in my own praise, and being continually told that I was ill manners, and once severely whipped for it, and the confined stream formed itself a new channel, and I began to speak for the future in the dispraise of others. This I found more agreeable to company, and almost as much so to myself. For what great difference can there be between putting yourself up or putting your neighbours down? Scandal, like other virtues, is in part its own reward, as it gives us the satisfaction of making ourselves appear better than others, and others no better than ourselves. My mother, good woman, and I have heretofore differed upon this account. She argued that scandal spoilt all good conversation, and I insisted that without it there would be no such thing. Our disputes once rose so high that we partied tea-table, and I concluded to entertain my acquaintance in the kitchen. The first day of this separation we both drank tea at the same time, but she with her visitors in the parlour. She would not hear of the least objection to anyone's character, but began a new sort of discourse in some such queer philosophical manner as this. I am mightily pleased sometimes, says she, when I observe and consider that the world is not so bad as people out of humour imagine it to be. There is something amiable, some good quality or other in every other body. If we are only to speak of people that are least respected, there is such a one is very dutiful to her father, and methinks she has a fine set of teeth. Such a one is very respectful to her husband. Such a one is very kind to her poor neighbours, and besides has a very handsome shape. Such a one is always ready to serve a friend, and in my opinion there is not a woman in town that has a more agreeable air and gait. This fine kind of talk, which lasted near half an hour, she concluded by saying, I do not doubt but every one of you have made these like observations, and I should be glad to have the conversation continued upon this subject. Just at that juncture I peeped in at the door, and never in my life before saw such a set of simple vacant countenances. They looked somehow neither glad, nor sorry, nor angry, nor pleased, nor indifferent, nor attentive, but, excuse the simile, like so many blue wooden images of rye dough. I, in the kitchen, had already begun a ridiculous story of Mr. Blank's intrigue with his maid, and his wife's behaviour upon the discovery. At some passages we laughed heartily, and one of the gravest of mamma's company, without making any answer to her discourse, got up to go see what the girls were so merry about. She was followed by a second, and shortly by the third, till at last the old gentlewoman found herself quite alone, and being convinced that her project was impracticable, she came herself and finished our tea with us, ever since which Sol has also been among the prophets, and our disputes lie dormant. By industry and application I have made myself the centre of all the scandal in the province. There is little stirring but I hear of it. I began the world with this maxim, that no trade can subsist without returns, and accordingly, whenever I received a good story, I endeavored to give two or better in the room of it. My punctuality in this way of dealing gave such encouragement that has produced me an incredible deal of business, which without diligence and good method it would be impossible for me to go through, for besides the stock of defamation thus naturally flowing in upon me, I practice an art by which I can pump a scandal out of people that are least inclined that way. Shall I discover my secret? Yes. To let it die with me would be inhuman. If I have never heard ill of some person, I always impute it to defective intelligence, for there are none without their faults, no, not one. If she is a woman, I take the first opportunity to let all her acquaintance know that I have heard that one of the handsomest or best men in town has said something in praise either of her beauty, her wit, her virtue, or her good management. If you know anything of human nature, you perceive that this naturally introduces a conversation turning upon all her failings, past, present, and to come. To the same purpose, and with the same success, I cause every man of reputation to be praised before his competitors in love, business, or esteem on account of any particular qualification. Near the times of election, if I find it necessary, I condemn every candidate before some of the opposite party, listening attentively to what is said of him in answer. But commendations in this latter case are not always necessary, and should be used judiciously. Of late years, I needed only observe what they said of one another freely, and having for the help of memory taken account of all informations and accusations received, whoever pursues my writing upon my death may happen to think that during a certain term the people of Pennsylvania chose into all their offices of honor and trust the various knaves, fools, and rascals in the whole province. The time of election used to be a busy time with me, but this year, with concern I speak it, people are grown so good-natured, so intent upon mutual feasting and friendly entertainment, that I see no prospect of much employment from that quarter. I mentioned above that without good method I could not go through my business. In my father's lifetime I had some instruction in accompts, which I now apply with advantage to my own affairs. I keep a regular set of books, and can tell at an hour's warning how it stands between me and the world. In my day-book I enter every article of defamation as transacted. For scandals received in I give credit, and when I pay them out again I make the persons to whom they respectively relate debtor. In my journal I add to each story by way of improvement such probable circumstances as I think it will bear. In my ledger the whole is regularly posted. I suppose the reader already condemns me in this heart for this particular of adding circumstances, but I justify that part of my practice thus. 'Tis a principle with me that none ought to have a great share of reputation than they really deserve. If they have, 'tis an imposition upon the public. I know it's every one's interest, and therefore believe they endeavour to conceal all their vices and follies, and I hold that those people are extraordinary foolish or careless who suffer a fourth of their failings to come to public knowledge. Taking then the common prudence and imprudence of mankind in a lump, I suppose none suffer above 1/5 to be discovered. Therefore, when I hear of any person's misdoings, I think I keep within bounds, if in relating it only make it 3 times worse than it is, and I reserve to myself the privilege of charging them with 1 fault in 4, which, for aught I know, they may be entirely innocent of. You see, there are but so few careful doing of justice as myself. What reason then have mankind to complain of scandal? In a general way, the worst that is said of us is only half what might be said if all our faults were seen. But alas, 2 great evils have lately befallen me at the same time, an extreme cold that I can scarce speak, and a most terrible toothache that I dare hardly open my mouth. For some days past I have received 10 stories for one I have paid, and I am not able to balance my accounts without your assistance. I have long thought if you would make your paper a vehicle of scandal, you would double the number of your subscribers. I send you herewith account of 4 knavish tricks, 2 cracked maidenheads, 5 cuckoldoms, 3 drubbed wives, and 4 henpecked husbands, all within this fortnight, which you may, as articles of news, deliver to the public, and if my toothache continues, shall send you more. Being in the meantime your constant reader, Alice Addertongue.